Oh, I'm good here. It'll be a quarter to bypass.
Okay, we like to get started here. Well, first off, we need to place a few thank yous that go to the snacks for last week. Chris and Mira, are they here? Oh, there we go. In the back. And then Maureen. And Rob, did you have any say on this, the goodies?
I kind of mixed.
That's further than I ever got. Okay, I never touched it when my wife makes the goodies, so that's actually pretty good. Again, there's a sign-up sheet in the back. Please sign up and to bring goodies for the next week. And then a reminder that we have an Apologetics conference in Pomona. If you would like to go, it's called the AMP Conference. You can look it up online, and it will be worth your while. I've gone to conferences like this many times. It's a Friday night and then an all-day Saturday. Big commitment, but you're going to hear some of the best speakers possible. So that's an AMP conference. Now, last semester, we studied Forensic Faith by J. Warner Wallace. And in that book, he challenged us that teaching is good, but training is better. You say, well, what is training? Well, training is teaching in such a way that it leads you to go out and use it. And training also provides opportunities for you to use what you learn. And these are optional opportunities. And so here's what we're going to do. We're taking a field trip. Now, last year, part of the training was to go to the Mormon Battalion. It's a museum in San Diego, and there were a dozen of us. Raise your hand if you went to the Mormon Battalion last year. Was that fun or what? That was a thumbs up. We had a great time. Like I said, there were a dozen of us from the class that went there. The Mormons gave us a presentation, and we heard it from them, what they believed and why they believed it. And then we got a chance to ask questions. And just like we've been teaching you the last couple of weeks, the importance of asking good questions. And so we're going to try to do it again. And this time we're going to go to Balboa Park. When? April 7th. Now, there's no sign-up sheet just yet because we'll wait till we get closer to the date, but I wanted you to jot it down so you can put it in your calendar if you want to go. You don't have to go. Again, it's a field trip. It's optional. Then afterwards, it's from like 9:15, we'll meet. We'll drive over to San Diego, and then we'll be there for a couple hours. You'll hear more about what that entails. And then we have lunch together. The lunch was as equal to being at the battalion because we got a chance to fellowship with each other, and we debriefed, and I was able to answer questions on Mormonism while we were there. So we'll do a very similar thing, is fellowship and debriefing. All right, I'm going to bring up Tracy Kreckman. Tracy will co-lead this. Actually, he's the tour guide. This is his thing. This is what he does. He goes and meets with the atheists there, but I'm going to let him take over and run through some slides to give you an idea of what this looks like.
Thank you. So these are the same slides that I had last time. Last session, I got to share a little bit about what we see there. So for those of you that were not able to join us last fall, this is typically how what things look like down at Balboa Park. Along the Prado on any given Saturday, there are folks that will set up tables, they'll set up pop-ups of all sorts of different beliefs. So these folks are there to share about their Eastern religions, Islam, who is Allah. You've got some Christians there who are specifically looking to talk to the Muslims. as well as other Christians that are looking to talk to anybody. The ones that I have spent the most time with are the atheists. And they're a very interesting bunch because whereas you can define a lot of the Eastern religion, okay, this is what we believe. The Muslims, this is what we believe. The atheists, the only thing they believe is there's no God. Or they will even say, well, I'm not even going to go so far as to say there is no God. I just believe in one less God than you do. And they're a very challenging bunch. They will, and if you notice this little whiteboard they have set up, every week they'll put up a question as a conversation starter with passersby. In this case, do you believe hell is a justifiable punishment for a simple lack of faith? Just real quickly, how might you answer that?
Yes.
There you go. It's a loaded question because there is a false assumption. People aren't sent to hell for lack of faith. They're sent to hell because of sin. But you can see how things get misrepresented. This is the sort of misinformation that's being put out there that is a challenge to us. And so our experience is to go down there and just listen to what they have to say. You can take your choice of any of the folks down there. There's no guarantee that there is any one particular group that's there. For example, I've seen the Jehovah's Witnesses there, some Saturdays, some not. Sometimes the Hare Krishnas are down there, some not. So it's kind of a grab bag, but the atheists are pretty consistent. The Muslims are fairly consistent. So you can kind of take your choice in terms of who you might want to spend your time talking to or listening to. There's no commitment to go up and get in their face. Sometimes you can just hang back and listen to others chat with them. And if you feel inspired to throw in a comment and join the conversation, feel free. But there's no obligation. So, any quick questions? Yeah.
Do they pay or have to get a permit to hold a booth down there?
I believe they do. Yeah. They have to be registered with a city in order to set up there. Yeah.
What's the 4,000 say?
First one, no, this one, there is no hell. So you can see how a lot of people that engage, oh yeah, I like that idea. There's no hell. Yeah. Okay. So I look forward to having you join us.
All right. Thank you, Tracy, for giving us some insight. Again, it's the 7th. We'll go from meet here we'll either meet here or the park and ride up of Del Lago, I think, over there by Bear Valley. We'll decide where to meet. Again, the lunch is optional, but the people that went to lunch, we had a fabulous time. And I said we'll have signups in a couple of weeks. This is a training opportunity. We are training you first and foremost to talk to your friends, relatives, and neighbors. But second, here's a chance to go and explore and walk up and down and just use those questions. What do you mean by that? And how did you come to that conclusion? You can walk up to a New Age booth not knowing a single thing about their beliefs, and you can just walk up and say, tell me what you believe. I'd love to hear what you believe. That's it. And you don't have to do any talking. Just pair up with somebody and let them do all the talking and watch them. So there's no pressure. So we're hoping people will want to come and do this, and we can move from just simply teaching to training. And many of the topics, especially tonight, with Gary talking on the problem of evil, that works well because the atheists attack this issue more than any other issue. So if you want to engage with the atheists, you need to be prepared to talk about the problem of evil. And fortunately, tonight, Gary's going to talk about that. Let me pray, and we'll bring Gary up so he can get started. Oh, Father, people need Jesus. They need your Son. There's many beliefs out there. There's many people who are far from you. And I just pray for opportunities at work, at home, anywhere that we meet people. Just give us opportunities to share, and pray for this field trip that people will want to go. that this sounds like something that will be interesting and educational and an opportunity to use what they've learned. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, it's good to see a good turnout again tonight. Thank you all for voting by coming here that this is important and helpful to you, and that's what we want. I feel very humbled being here doing this tonight because this is a huge issue. This is something people for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years have battled about and talked about and thought about, and every culture has tried to deal with the problem of evil. We say there's a God. Every culture says, well, most cultures say there's a God. You know, how do you reconcile the two things? So all we can do tonight, and I say we because I want to have you participating as well, but I think all we can do is just scratch the surface and begin thinking about it. So please don't think this is it, 35, 40 minutes, and then you walk out of here and you've got the problem of evil solved, okay? So I don't need that kind of pressure. This is just a montage of a lot of headlines, unfortunately, we see way too often. But here's a real one from the San Diego Union Tribune about, October of last year. You remember the guy that shot up people in Las Vegas? And look at that title there, Act of Pure Evil. And so once again, and it happened in 9/11, and it's happened so many times, the question comes out. And you know what the question is. If there's a good God, and that's what Christians believe, there's a good God. This is not a God of evil. This is not some horned God that is there to make your life miserable. But if there's a good God, ... where are we going with the rest of that sentence? Why does he allow evil to exist? I mean, wouldn't he wipe it out and get it out of there? Now, let me give you some answers that other people have come up with. We'll deal with a couple of them here in a minute. Well, of course, the atheist says, you're asking the wrong question. There is no God. Why are you saying, why would God allow something? There's no God. Let's start there. That's the atheist response. How about Eastern religions? It's just an illusion. The pain and suffering you're going through, it's an illusion. They call it Maya. That's their idea. Have you ever heard of a book called When Bad Things Happen to Good People? Okay, most people have, even though it's probably 20 years old now. This was a rabbi, a Jewish rabbi, and he lost his son. And it was a painful thing, and he struggled with that, and he wrote a book. And his idea, anybody know? Do you know what his main idea was? Okay, so maybe you haven't read the book or anything, but his claim was, God is good and he loves us, and it breaks his heart when bad things happen, but he can't do anything about it. He's not all-powerful. Well, do you want to worship a God like that? A God that can't take care of things? That just seemed like an odd situation for a Jewish rabbi to come up with. But it was a big book, and I noticed a lot of people saying, yeah, you'd heard of it. But his idea is God would love to do this for us, but he can't. How about Islam? What's their answer? Is God really all good? No, he can change his mind. It's called abrogation. You ever heard of that one? Take a look sometime at the Quran. It has really nice, fun, peaceful verses in the beginning, and then they get nasty later on because God can change his mind, and he's going to weigh you, and you better toe the mark. God is not necessarily a God of love at all. So these are just some answers. I'm going to spend a little more time, though, as far as the two big worldviews that are clashing today. It'd be theism, Christianity especially, against atheism, non-Christian, non-God belief. So here's Richard Dawkins' answer. See if you think this is one of the most chilling things you've ever heard. Dawkins is the kind of guy, give him credit. He comes out and he says things. He doesn't hide. He doesn't mince words. He doesn't try to sugarcoat atheism. Here's what he said. Sorry, it's a long quote, but I just want you to follow and see what's going on here. In a universe of blind physical forces and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt and other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason to it nor any justice. The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at the bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither knows nor cares. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. What are some initial reactions you have when you hear that one? Yeah.
Well, if there's no such thing as evil, then I'll come over to his house and steal his stereo.
We're going to talk about the standards. Yeah, that's a good point. So what are we according to this? We're robotic, aren't we? We're puppets. We're dancing to our DNA. So Hitler, let's always take the worst case scenarios. Those are always effective for people. So why would we get mad at Hitler killing 6 million Jews, going after gypsies, going after homosexuals, having all these weird operations by some of these Dr. Mengeles and Eichmann running these concentration camps? Why would we get upset at him setting up this evil, evil state when he's just dancing to his DNA? Why would you worry about him? On the other hand, why would you praise Mother Teresa? She's just dancing to her DNA. So one is no better than the other. We're all just robotic dancing to our own DNA. DNA neither knows nor cares. It just is. Get over it. So I want to slow down at this point, and these would be things that if we had Richard Dawkins here, we might want to ask him. So some atheist says there really is no such thing as evil, or is there? What if we pinned them down and said, was Hitler evil? Or did you just not like what he did? Because remember, he says there's no evil. Well, then it's just personal preference, isn't it? Isn't that what he's saying? Ew, I don't like it. Ooh, that's bad. Ooh, that's good. It's just personal preference. There's no such thing as evil. Really? Well, come up with some of the worst case examples and lay them in front of an atheist and just see what they say. So whatever they hate, environmental pollution and things like that, say, so that's not really evil, you just don't like it. Well, but what if I do like it? Some of you know J.P. Moreland. He's a apologist and an extremely interesting thinker. He apparently told this story really one time. He got this guy that was atheistic. He said, there's no evil, it's just, we set our own standards. He said, oh, okay. He said, tell you what, he said, you want to come with us this weekend? We're going to have a lot of fun. And the guy says, what are you going to do? He said, well, a bunch of us get together, and we rent a boat, and we go out on a lake, and we have a big drum of poison. And we all chip in $5 into the kitty, and then we dump this 10-gallon deal of poison, and we see how many fish come to the surface, and whoever gets the closest number of dead fish gets the kitty. And this guy just, steam coming out. And so J.P. Moreland says, it sounds like more than you don't like that. It sounds like you think that's evil to do that. He said, I'm not really going to do it, but this guy thought that was evil. And you can take, some of these others at racism. You just don't like racism, or do you think it's absolutely wrong? So you're kind of pinning the atheists in the corner. If they say, I just don't like it, well, then where's the standard? So you don't like it, but I like it. Now who's going to adjudicate between the two? See the problem there? Because you don't like something, it's like asparagus or something. One person likes it, one person doesn't. You just say, oh, well, and you just walk away, and you just kind of agree to disagree. Are you going to do that with moral issues like this? Genocide? It doesn't make any sense. I think a second thing you could ask an atheist might be the other question up here. Okay, let's take God out of the equation. You've got pain and suffering. Okay, so you take God out of the equation. Does that solve the problem of evil? You still got the evil. You just don't have God in the picture anymore. But that didn't get rid of the evil, didn't get rid of the suffering, didn't get rid of people being hurt. And then I always thought it was weird. There's a famous atheist who thought he really had Christians. He said, okay, you Christian, come alongside the bed of a dying child. What are you going to say? Well, could we turn the question around? Do you think it might be fair to ask the atheist? What do you say at the sight of a dying child? I guess you say to the parents, sorry, life's over. You'll never see her again. Better luck next time. Hope you have a child that'll do okay. It's the way it goes. There's no justice. Everybody's just dancing. Her dance is done. That's not a satisfying answer, is it? That's awfully chilling. So what's the Christian response? Christian says, we predict something is evil. Christians are not surprised, are we? That there's evil out in the world. You see headlines like that, you go, yeah, that's the human heart at work, unfortunately. And Christianity, thank goodness, not only recognizes that there is such a thing as evil, it recognizes a cure for it. So what we're going to do this evening, if that's okay, is to, and I'm just going to throw a lot of possible answers to this whole problem of evil at you. You'll like some, maybe you'll find some that you scratch your head and say, I don't know if I buy into it. It's okay. I'm just going to throw out a lot of them. And we're going to split them into two categories. Philosophical answers. In other words, you're just sitting around smoking a pipe, having your tweed jacket on, and you got the evening free, and you're just communicating with other people. It's just kind of just a fun bull session where you're just talking stuff. Okay, so let's talk about that. But then let's talk about emotional answers, because Christianity offers both. So when people have been hit in the gut and they've really got something going on, we have good answers where people are struggling too. So let's talk the philosophy first, and then we'll come back to the more emotional kinds. So here's one philosophical answer. I love the book of Job. Do you? Job's friends come along, they keep offering him all this advice, and you're kind of rolling your eyes because you got to see behind the curtain, didn't you? You knew what was really going on. They have no idea. They should have just shut up. They were great friends at the beginning because they just sat in the crud with Job and just suffered with him. But then they started opening their mouths and screwed up everything. So finally, Job is saying, gosh, if God would just show himself. And so God shows up toward the end of Job. And he says this, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Dress for action, like a man. I'll question you, and you make it known to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. How about that sarcasm from God? Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? And the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Why is God asking him these kinds of questions? We'll get Job's response in a minute. Because you notice he's not answering Job. Job's saying, why in the world is all this stuff happening to me? And his friends are saying, what? It's because you sinned, Job. Think about it, Job. It must have been something you've done badly. And Job's going, no. And he says, I just wish I had God here so God would tell me what's going on. So God shows up. And instead of saying, well, okay, Job, let me tell you, roll sleeves up, let's talk about it, God says, let me ask you some questions. Why is he doing that to Job? What does he seem to be suggesting, do you think?
Who is Job to question God?
Who is Job to question God? He can't answer any of these questions. Were you there, Job, when I did these things? We've got God up here, and we got Job down here, and Job's going to try to figure this stuff all out. And Job finally catches on. He says, surely I spoke of things I did not understand. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore, what? I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. Do we have some Job in us? I always think of people that say, well, there can't be a good reason for evil. Really? How do you know the mind of God? Are you sure there isn't something beyond what you're aware of that may bring evil and turn it around for good? And I was talking to Karen before our meeting started tonight, and she was talking about something terrible in her life that some of it turned into good as a result of God. But we don't see that because we're all a little bit of Job, aren't we? We see about this far, and it's kind of tunnel vision, we just don't see very much. And God's got the bigger picture, and we got the nerve to say, well, if I can't figure it out, then God didn't have a good reason. Oh, really? Were you there when he did all of these things? No. I wish this showed up a little bit. This is one of my favorite illustrations. It's the Garden of Eden. Okay, so it's beautiful over here, and it's sunshiny, and trees are growing, and all this kind of stuff. And there's light, because there's the angel, and the man and woman have just been that probably will help a little bit. And the man and woman are down here, little tiny figures. They're having to leave, and look what it's turning into. It's jagged, it looks corrupt, it's dark, it's twisted, and all that kind of stuff. So what am I going for here? We say part of the answer to the problem of evil is because of the fall. What's happened? What are we going with? We at one time had a close connection with God. And then sin, we decide we're going to do things on our own. Thank you very much, God. We can take it from here. And Adam and Eve were, in a sense, our representatives, weren't they? It was kind of a federal headship, just like our government can take us into war, and we may not want that, but we've elected these people. So in a sense, Adam was the best and Eve was the best that we could come up with, and they're in the Garden of Eden, and they decide, no thanks, and they go off on a different direction, and God says, you've broken communion. with me. So they suffer, but do they suffer only? What else has suffered as a result of the fall? All of it says creation is groaning. And so when you have diseases and all sorts of things out in nature, that don't turn out well and can cause problems for us, as a Christian philosophical answer, we can say part of it is nature is not the way it's supposed to be, but it will be someday, which is, of course, part of the hope. But it's twisted right now. We're twisted. Nature's twisted, all because of this fall. Here's something else I think is pretty powerful. Again, we're still talking philosophical answers. Suffering does what? What do they say? No pain, no gain, don't they? In gymnasiums, people working out. Here's Paul talking. He says, we also rejoice in our sufferings. Really? Rejoice in sufferings? Paul says, yeah, look at the big picture. We rejoice. Why? Because we know that suffering, I wanted to walk through this process. I think it's interesting step by step. Suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character. And then he says character produces hope. So can we just break them down one by one? So you suffer, and what's perseverance? Keep on trucking. You don't like it, and you don't want to be in that situation, but you keep going. You don't fold. And if you do that, if you keep that kind of approach, you're going to step with God's help on. You're not going to collapse and quit on Him. What does perseverance change? It does something to your character. You're a different person as a result, aren't you? You've been through the fire. And because your character is different, and you think about what you used to be like, and you think about what you are now, how does that produce hope?
You're moving in a positive direction.
Yeah. You're a different person because of these things that happen to you, and probably if more trouble comes, and it's probably going to come, you'll persevere, and you'll become an even better person, more Christ-like, as you go through these things. I just got to tell you, I haven't suffered much in my life, but a time or two that I do feel like it helped my character. I got a long way to go, but I feel like because I went through those things, it helped me as a person. Anybody else have a story like that? Because we don't have a ton of time tonight, but anybody have a story where you went through something and as a result you came out feeling a little stronger, feeling more sympathetic, more open to dealing with other people who are struggling? Yes.
I lost my son 15 years ago.
Oh.
And I woke up the day after losing him and said, I'm going to find the grace in this. I'm going to have peace in my life. And in fact, and I hesitate to tell the story to most people because my life is better. I'm a better person. I'm a different person.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I've gone through that and fortunately never questioned my faith through it.
Yeah.
I knew all this before.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
good for me.
Yeah. One more maybe, and yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Could you guys hear what she said? You go through it, and then you come up with another problem later on, but you remember how God got you through the original problem. How about something like this? Planes take off and crash. And people say, why did that have to happen? But you notice, the reason why I picked an airplane is they have black boxes on these airplanes. What's the purpose of a black box? Tell what happened, and then what do they do with airplanes because of that? They correct them, and those airplanes will be better the next time. Help me out on this. I may be off on my statistics. I think they said last year there were 0 fatalities. Is that correct? Now, was that just U.S. or was that international?
I think it was, I'm not sure, but I think it was every major international. I think there were some smaller things, but I mean every major airline.
Isn't that something? 0. I mean, you just think one airport, Lindbergh, and then LAX and SFO and all these places, flight after flight after flight after flight. Why are they doing so well? The engines are way better. The controls are way better. The maintenance, I'm sure, is way better. The what? Training. Yeah, the training. Because somebody has had pain and suffering, and it's a terrible thing. But the results of that are we have improved and gotten better, even things like natural accidents. And so I want you to think about this as a question. All right, so God sees a plane about to go down, and he lifts its wings up and takes it to the airport and gently sets it down. Or an elevator cable snaps, and he prevents the elevator from crashing to the ground. Or whatever it is. Ship disasters, Titanic. He pulls the iceberg out of the way, and the Titanic finishes its voyage. What does that do, do you think, to the human race if God consistently intervenes and prevents things like this? I would think so. Would you agree? You're going to do riskier and riskier behavior. You're going to be a sloppier person than you would have been. You wouldn't watch your kids as much. And I mean, just all sorts of things start happening because, God will take care of it. But God, over and over again, you see him in the Old Testament and the New Testament, he wants people to stand on their own. This is not a God that wants to make you a puppet. He tells his disciples, go and make disciples, instead of, okay, I'll just hang out here on earth for another 2,000 years and show you how it's done. I mean, he goes back to heaven. He says, you take care of it. And so the whole process, the Old Testament and New Testament, is moving a God that grows his children up, and then they go out and they do things on their own. So I think that's part of the answer. Trace?
How do we know that he doesn't do that? If he were to do that, would we know?
Yeah.
But the other thing is that we don't realize if God were to do that, the level to which it lowers him, essentially as just a cosmic maid cleaning up our messes.
No, that's a good point. A cosmic maid. Yes.
Well, you can't blame God for an airplane accident. He didn't build the airplane. He didn't tell you to get in it. He didn't tell you to do any of those things. He didn't demand for us to do that.
Yeah.
So we take, I mean, he kept the laws of physics in force while we were flying the airplane. But if we mess up on the maintenance or don't know how to fly it, that's not God's fault.
Yeah.
Never get stuck up there. That's right.
What about this? Again, we're still talking the philosophical answers. These are the ones where you don't bring these up with somebody who's suffering and really hurting. I mean, these are just things to think about ahead of time to kind of lay some foundational material. But what about suffering and pain is a way for us to look out at the world and make some improvements. And so you got a verse in Matthew, I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. So you take care of these people. James 1, religion that God accepts is this: look after orphans and widows when they have distress. Get out there, make a difference in it. Christianity is always the first one that sets up Red Cross and goes here and goes there. And it was the Roman Empire that didn't care about orphans, didn't care about the sick. And it was the Christians that came along and often died themselves taking care of the outcast kids that were put aside and just put on a mountaintop to die, the newly born. And it was the Christians that would come along, and it turned the Roman Empire upside down because they didn't care about this stuff. And it was the Christians that went out to make the world a better place. Hebrews 10, let us consider how we may spur one another toward love and good deeds. So don't just sit around and love. That's great. Do good deeds. We ought to spur each other along for that. So pain and suffering allows us to come alongside people, make a difference. Compare this to Islam for just a minute. Very deterministic religion. A lot of resignation there. There's a story that there was a apartment complex that had a very low railing on one of the upper floors, and several kids had toppled over because of the railing was not big enough, and they were messing with it, and they fell over to their death. They didn't change anything. They didn't try to improve it or fix it. And in fact, one Muslim creed says this: it's he who causes harm and good. The good works of some and the evil of others are signs that God wishes to punish some and reward others. So if bad things happen to those poor kids, broken bones or worse, death, it was God's plan. That's what he wanted to do. It was okay with him. About Hinduism and Buddhism, the idea of karma. Somebody who does not like Hinduism said this: I really don't agree with the concept of karma. To believe in karma is to believe that the victims of 9/11, for example, deserved what they got, that they all did something to make those men fly planes into a building, or that Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, that's Columbine, they only shot students that in some way deserved it. That any victim gets what they had coming to them because of their past actions. That's a terrible concept, don't you think? That's why you could go down streets of India or someplace and you'll see people walk right past the suffering sitting there because they're paying off their karma. They have what's coming to them. They have to pay that off so then their reincarnation they'll be better. And then along comes somebody like a Mother Teresa. Now what does she do? She takes them up and holds them and takes them places and bathes them and puts ointment on them and cares for them, because that's not the Christian concept. Hey, you're paying for your sin. We'll just let you continue to deal with your bad karma. Here's another defense, a very common one that you probably heard before, is that God loves us so much that he does not want to create puppets. And he's willing, like we do with our own kids, you raise a child and you love that kid to death, but there's coming a time when that child goes out in the world and may make some really stupid mistakes and may turn his back or her back on you. But we think it's worth it. We think we want to have that kind of independence for our children. And people have used that argument as well for God. You don't want to have puppets on a string. You don't want to have robots that are programmed. And so God gives us the freedom, knowing that some of us are not going to use it very well. Then we're going to turn on each other and we're going to do some bad things. But he apparently, again, trying to see into the mind of God, but he must believe this idea of independence and free will is so powerful and so important to what it means to be a human that he's willing to take that chance with us. Well, it has to be all indirect, don't you think? Yeah, I mean, there's not a verse that says that. Greg Kokel once said, people that ask him, why does God do such and such, whatever it is, he says, he's got a quick answer for that. I don't know. So, but I think that makes sense. Do you? That God trusts us and wants us to...
I sort of use the argument. I don't have a lot of information, but that when people talk about that we were given the choice, and we chose choice, so there are ramifications on that.
Yeah.
So I guess I see choice as free will.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like this one. People will say, God, why don't you get rid of evil? Why do we always say evil is over there, and evil is that, and evil is the shooting, and evil is that guy that cheated on his taxes, and evil is that person that left his wife, and evil... Isn't that funny, though? Here's a good response to that one. Well, okay, so God gets rid of evil at midnight. Where are you going to be at 12:01? Where am I going to be at 12:01? Is evil the big, big stuff, or is it the stuff we do all the time? Because we're all broken people. It's the stuff we do all the time. It's the omission and the commission of sin, isn't it? Trace?
Sorry, getting back to her question previously about the free will. There's an argument that states that God just doesn't want just a good world. If he made us in such a way that we could not sin, okay, that would be maybe a good thing from one standpoint. But from another standpoint, is it the best thing? God doesn't want things just to be good. He wants them to be the best they can be. And in order for things to be the best they can be, it requires evil as a counterbalance, because there are certain virtues like courage, mercy, long-suffering, forgiveness that cannot be developed without the presence of evil. So that in one regard, evil is necessary in order to develop the very best virtues.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
When God created the world, he created it perfect at that time. And he created the free will for man to choose. He didn't create evil. He created the possibility for evil so man could choose between the two. And he can choose love and respect, obviously, or he can choose something the opposite, which would be evil. Yeah. The point is that evil doesn't exist because God created it. Evil exists because of man's sin chose to do it their way as opposed to God's way.
Yeah.
They're the ones who started sin. So
yeah. What about natural disasters? Some people get real upset when they hear of, this was a photo from the San Francisco earthquake of 1906, I think. Thousands dead because of the fires, primarily, afterwards. The earthquakes were terrible that happened, but the fires. So people say, well, you got cyclones and you got we've had some hurricanes, and you've got earthquakes, and you've got tsunamis that come in and wash away 50,000 people in Indonesia or something like that. Well, here's the deal. You have to have all of these things functioning on a planet like Earth to have life. You've got to have earthquakes. You've got to have the capability of winds developing, and you've got to have cyclonic forces. You've got to have all these things, or you don't get life. And unfortunately, we end up putting cities on fault zones, or we put houses on floodplains, or whatever it is. I always scratch my head when somebody gets their house is on a floodplain and gets we'll build again. It's like, well, yeah, okay, do it somewhere else. Don't do it there. It's obviously a bad spot. New Orleans is behind a dike system and is basically below sea level. Good idea? No, I don't think so. I mean, well, what were they thinking of there? So yeah, natural disasters happen, and it's awful. But frankly, you got to have the Earth have the ability to do these things. Circulate materials and bring stuff up from deep within the Earth. So anyway, that there's been a bunch of people that have talked about that. Let's talk about the emotional answers here, because we got to move along a little faster. Would you agree with this? One thing suffering does is it brings us down a little bit. Here's what Paul said: to keep me from becoming conceited, there was given me a thorn in my flesh. So Paul could have, he was the premier guy, wasn't he? He got taken up into heaven and seen all these miraculous things, and God spoke to him individually, and he was the real apostle all over the place. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, and this is a key verse. You know why I know this verse? I went to Emanuel Faith when I was over there on 6th or 7th? 7th. And that's what it said across the front there. My grace is sufficient for thee. And when I was a kid, I said, yeah, nice verse. But in context, it's powerful, isn't it? This is God talking to Paul. He says, do you really need to have a perfect physical body? Do you really have the need to speak in beautiful tones? He says, no, my grace will take care of you. And so that kind of brought Paul down a bit, huh? So my power is made perfect in weakness. It's not the brightest, it's not the boldest, it's not the strongest, it's not the wisest that often do the most for God anyway, is it? Here's another Christian answer. Pain and suffering allows us to reach others. Again, this is Paul. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. And again, I'm sorry to keep picking on Karen here, but she is now dealing with other people who have gone through things that she's gone through, and she's really effective at that because she tells her story. And she's there. She's connecting with these people. I was telling her before we started, I said, I would be a terrible person to go up to somebody and tell them to stop smoking because I've never smoked. So I don't know what that's like to go through withdrawal. I can't just say, well, just suck it up. You'll get over it. People look at me and go, yeah, that didn't help. So I've never gone through that. I can't do it. I can't do drug addiction help. I can't be part of a counseling. I mean, I could. I guess I could read enough information, but I don't have that gut level interaction that I could give. I have no story to spill. And because I haven't gone through that, I haven't had the agony of it, and then to get myself beyond that. So I'm really limited in those areas. I'm grateful, by the way, not to have gone through some of those things, but I can't do the things like Paul's talking about here, at least in some of those areas. Now, I dealt with depression some time ago. Okay, so I'm there if people want to talk depression, because at one time it was just in a book, and it was like, really? People go through this? And then I went through it. Okay, very different feeling. All of a sudden, it's it just gets you in the gut. Here's another emotional answer. This is C.S. Lewis. He said, you know what pain does? And Sharon and I were talking about this today. It acts as God's megaphone. And here's what Lewis said. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It's his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Do you agree? All of a sudden you pray a little more and you think a little more, you read a little more in the Bible. J.P. Moreland went through a lot of depression and had all sorts of things hitting him. This wonderful apologist up at Biola, he's putting out book after book. He went through a terrible, just nosedive thing with depression. He said all he could get out of his mouth was, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. He said he must have said that 100 times a day. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. because God was real to him at that time. That's God's megaphone when we're dealing with a lot of pain and suffering. Here's another answer. Pain and suffering encourages us, doesn't it, to have a relationship with God? And we serve the only God who has wounds. Here's what Tim Keller said. By the way, I'm going to mention it in just a few minutes, but Keller has got an excellent book on pain and suffering. It's called Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering. And so Keller is a pastor back east, and this guy is amazing. If you have a chance to listen to some of his sermons, you can just pick any of his books at random and read them. A couple of them are actually aimed more towards non-Christians, but every one of them is just beautiful. Here's what he said. We don't know the reason God allows evil and suffering to continue or why it's so random, but now at least we know what the reason is not. It can't be that he doesn't love us. It can't be that he doesn't care. How do we know he loves us? He came. He suffered more than we're going to ever suffer because of love, not because we were worth it to him at that time. We were terrible. Comes to us as sinners and goes on that cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? He's lost that connection that he had from eternity on the cross, beaten and whipped and humiliated and all that kind of stuff. So whatever happens to us, we can't say, God's got it in for me. Oh, God's got love for you. He doesn't have it in for you, but he's got love for you because he came and he did all these amazing things for us. Here's another answer. Again, a really powerful emotional answer. We've been promised the Holy Spirit. We're not going to go through this by ourselves, are we? Romans. I got a lot of verses. By the way, you guys don't need to, I don't know if anybody's taking notes, but I'll be glad to send you the PowerPoint if you want, so you can, slow down and see the notes and just, go with it tonight and don't sit there and agonize. Sorry, I should have mentioned that about 20 minutes ago. So here's Romans 8, and this is Paul talking. For you did not receive a spirit that makes you a slave again to fear, but you received the spirit of sonship. You're connected to God, not just a third-rate relative out there somewhere. You're connected. You're a son. You're an heir with him. And by him we cry, Abba. That's like daddy in Aramaic. I mean, that's a warm communication. This is not, you wouldn't say this to Allah. He's not your daddy. He's scary, and he may not like you no matter what you do. But we say, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit. The Spirit testifies with our spirit that we're God's children. You don't punish and hurt your children. Something's going on that he cares for us. We don't know exactly what's going on, but we know that we're connected as sons. The Spirit helps us in our weakness. Sometimes we don't even know what to pray, Paul says in other places. And the Spirit will help us out in that. And of course, isn't this the prime answer to the problem of pain and suffering? It's about this big on the scale of eternity. We say, yeah, if you're an atheist, you got 60, 70, 80 years as an adult, you'd be really upset if you were hit with a stroke or a coronary problem or cancer. You'd say, I got cheated. But if this world is just a little slim line on an eternity scale, what does it matter? I don't know if you can read that in 1 Corinthians. No eye has ever seen, no ear has heard, no mind has imagined what God has prepared for those who love him. Paul says we can't even fathom it. And I don't know about you, but I get so caught up in the here and now. It's good to kind of step back once in a while, isn't it, and think about where are we going and what's going to happen after this life. There's another life out there. And all that stuff that we worried about and all that stuff we agonized over, it's nothing. Some final thoughts. This is G.K. Chesterton, a great Christian thinker around 1900. Apparently a newspaper in England, as 1900 came around, they decided they would talk to some intellectuals, get them to respond and say, what's wrong with the world? 1900, think about that. It's before World War I. Everybody's going to fix everything. It's going to be a wonderful 20th century. So they've sent little cards out or something saying, including Chesterton, tell us what's wrong with the world. So some people wrote these long things about it's our education system. We just need to improve this, this, this. Somebody else, it was politicians. If we just change our system of government, blah, blah, blah. We need to take better care of the poor, da, 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 da. So what's wrong with the world? You know what Chesterton said? I am. 2 words. What does he mean by that? I'm broken. And isn't that a good starting point? I know it sounds terrible to say, isn't that a good starting point? Maybe if we've got to recognize it's us. The evil's not there. It's here. We're the ones who are broken. And so, looking at fixing this system and fixing that system, we're the ones that need fixing. So 2 words, I am. I'm the problem. Here's another thing. The atheist and the person, maybe let's say it's not an atheist, but not a Christian, they get really busy trying to fix this world without God, don't they? And they're always going to set up some kind of utopian thing, whether it's Marxism or whatever. This is North Korea. Haven't they done a wonderful job establishing a utopia there? No. But it's the people's paradise, isn't it? That's what it says. Yeah. Yeah, one person. I mean, look at the Democratic People's Republic of. Every word in there is a lie. But, Marxism works great on paper. It just doesn't work well with people. When when Bradford and the Pilgrims first came over, what they tried at first? They tried socialism. They said, wouldn't that be great on paper? It'd be a great system. Look at this wonderful land out here. We'll all go out together and we'll farm it. And we'll take all those products, sell it to England, make a fortune. And people said, I don't feel like hoeing that today. You go hoe it. So they didn't get many crops. So Bradford said, time out. We got to change things. That land is this family's. That land is that family's. And all of a sudden they just went crazy out there. And that's been the story of America. So are there any utopias? No. And I get so discouraged when I see people saying, if we just change Wall Street, if we just change political parties, if we just do this, the moral majority, whatever it is, we'll bring utopia into America. We'll bring whatever it is. And it always falls flat, doesn't it? Even from a conservative perspective, we just get the right people in office. Well, they're human. They're broken. And they're going to fall flat. And then we get disappointed and we put them up on a pedestal and we tear the pedestal down. Say, we'll try it again. It's like, really? This is realism. We're all broken. We could help others, couldn't we? I just put a couple of examples. You can probably think of some other organizations that you support. World Vision, helping kids, and Open Doors, trying to deal with the persecuted Christians around the world. But there are a lot of wonderful organizations that we could join, be part of. Maybe a couple of other things. Practice our response before we face suffering. It's awfully hard to get good at dealing with it when you're in the middle of it. Better to think about it ahead of time, read a book about it, or pray about it, or just think about what qualities could you work on if you're going to end up in that. I say when you work get yourself into a problem. Remember God's goodness so we can trust Him during difficult times. Isn't that true? We go through a bad time, but we've had 10 really, really good times before that. And if we remember that and say, He got me through all these other things, He'll get me through this. And I think because of time I'm going to skip, I was going to ask you some of the good things in your life that God's brought about, but at least think about that. Just run through a short list, answers to prayer, families being healed, whatever it is that God's done for you. And if He's done those kinds of things, He'll get you through whatever the problem happens to be. Okay, I mentioned the Keller book. It's Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering, powerful. The Case for Faith is, it has a chapter about pain and suffering. And I don't have the time. Okay, never mind. I'll tease you with it. Just read the chapter that talks about pain and suffering. It's got a powerful story about a guy who accidentally ran over and killed his own child. Is there anything worse? I mean, it's just awful. But it's got a powerful ending to the story, so you can find that in The Case for Faith. Yancey, one of my favorite authors, Where is God When It Hurts? And then Os Guinness wrote a book called Unspeakable, talking about evil in the world. I'm just going to end real quickly here, but I'm back to Tim Keller. He said, people who haven't suffered much are often shallow, unacquainted with both their weaknesses and strengths, naive about human nature and life, and almost always fragile and unresilient. That's a lot there, isn't it? Do you know people like that? They're okay as long as everything is fine around them. But if they haven't gone through that pain and suffering, they haven't been annealed, is that the word for it? To be hardened in a good way because of going through the fire. Almost always fragile and unresilient. I hate to, I'm real quickly, I'll get myself maybe in trouble, I don't know. I think the next generation now that's out at college, I teach out of college, that they haven't gone through a lot of pain and suffering, and they're fragile, many of them, and they're really unresilient. They don't want to hear anything different than what they've heard from all of their, whatever, teachers and stuff. So I think some of that's going on right now. Okay, one more part from Tim Keller. Two-parter here. Think of 4 things that we want. Do you want to know who you are, your strengths and weaknesses? That's 1. Do you want to be a compassionate person who skillfully helps people who are hurting? That's 2. Do you want to have such a profound trust in God that you're fortified against the disappointments of life? 3. Do you want simply to be wise about how life goes? Well, so far so good. We'd all like that, wouldn't we? I'd like to hang around people that had those 4 qualities. Here's what he has to say. He says there are 4 crucial things to have, but none of them are readily achievable without suffering. There's no way to know who you really are until you're tested. There's no way to really empathize and sympathize with other suffering people unless you've suffered yourself. There's no way to really learn how to trust in God until you're drowning. Ouch. Okay, I don't have the time for the Father's story. I'm just going to end then with this one. Jesus said this, peace I leave with you, do not be afraid, I've overcome the world. Again, it's that tunnel vision that we get about our problems right now and not seeing the big picture that God has. Well, that was a whirlwind tour. I know it was a lot of information. Any last statements or comments before Steve comes up, Trace?
Oftentimes in my encounters, both online and in person, I will hear something like, well, God of the Old Testament isn't very nice. He allows all this evil to happen. There were a couple of people at a funeral of a teenager who tragically died in an accident or whatever. And one of them says, well, isn't it a tragedy that this person died so young? And the other replied, well, given the fact that the wages of sin is death, isn't it a miracle we all live that, or that any of us live to be that old?
Yeah.
You know, we are walking dead.
Yeah.
And it's just by the grace of God that He doesn't give us what we deserve on the spot.
Yeah.
The other thing is that a lot of people think they're just discovering this evil God of the Old Testament. Like, hey, let me show you something that you don't know. Like, these words have not been hidden. These things have been in the Bible for 3,000 years. Old Testament.
Yeah.
And have you ever looked up what people have said prior to you? Have you ever looked at what Augustine had said about the problem of evil? This stuff has been answered a long, long time ago.
Yeah, it's funny, these people called the new atheists think they've rediscovered or discovered some new comments about God and new criticisms about God. They've been there a long time and have been answered. Yeah, good point. Well, can we do a Q&A? Is that all right?
Sure, we can do a Q&A. Before we even start, I don't think you have a slide here that mentions that next week, before I forget about next week, I will be speaking on the doctrine of the Trinity. Why speak on the doctrine of the Trinity? For multiple reasons. One, so many people don't know how to explain it. And it's who God is the Trinity. God of Christianity is the triune God. Second, there are many groups that attack the doctrine of the Trinity. You go to Balboa Park, you want to talk to a Jehovah's Witness, you better know the Trinity. You want to talk to a Mormon, you better know the Trinity. You want to talk to a Muslim, you better know the Trinity. And so it's important that we know that, and so that's what I'm going to help explain to you and equip you so that you can go out and talk to somebody who doesn't believe that God is a triune God. So that's next week. So any questions pertaining to the topic or anything else that you'd like to ask?
Yeah, maybe it's something that happened or you've read about this week or thought about.
And I can get a volunteer. Nate, why don't you go back and grab the mic back there and help. We'd like to use the mic because some of the questions or comments get drowned out because they're kind of soft and not everybody can hear them. So raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, and Nathan will bring the mic over. Cornell, I know you're itching. You got one for us tonight? Not at the moment. Okay. I don't want to put you on this. Well, hold it. You can't go without the mic.
I don't know if this is really a question, but like in Job, it even says in Job that he knew Job before he was even born. So he actually knew what was going to happen to Job. So therefore I don't believe this, but so he caused the evil that happened to Job because he could have stopped it. What do we do with predestination? Or is that a word that we use? What do we use for that God foreknew? I mean, it says it foreknew everything in the world before it even happened.
Well, I think you've mixed quite a few different issues here, all into one. What's the first issue you want? Ask us the first issue. Does God know things in the future? The answer is yes, because God is omniscient, which means he's all-knowing. So nothing happens. Do you know God knows what we're going to pray before we pray it? And in fact, he can start answering your prayer before you even pray it. And so Ephesians says he knew us before the foundation of the world. So everyone has been known because there's nothing new to God that happens. And the issue of predestination, that's going to be my last topic. So we'll save that for that.
Well, Steve, the answer that I use when I'm comforting people who've lost a son or something like that, when I do a military casualty notification or something like that, is that God in his wisdom allows what he in his power could easily prevent. So like when I had a soldier that committed suicide up at Fort Lewis in December 7th, and I had the duty to notify the father down in Imperial Beach, I was able to use that. And what really brought them comfort, because the Lord had already set that up, in that 14 years previously, his older brother had died from a gunshot wound playing with the girl next door, and they found a gun and shot him in the head. And that brought both the parents from a Mormon background. They divorced over the stress of it, which is entirely understandable. But God provided them each with a believing spouse that for the last 14 years, they had that relationship. They still had a good relationship between the two of them. And I got to do the notification of the mother, too, because the mother was at Lindbergh Field waiting for the son to come in on the airport. And both of them come from the Mormon background, and through the loss of that first son, came to know the Lord. So I could say that this other son, he's already up in heaven. He already can see and knows how God's going to use this, because that son was baptized when he was 14. A 14-year-old doesn't do that on a whim, you know. So God, in his wisdom, allows what he in his power could easily prevent, and it brings comfort to those that have a loss at times.
Yeah, just because God knows doesn't mean God causes. You were saying God caused that evil. No, he knows our free will choices.
But a lot of people will say, well, why did he foreknew it? Why did he invent it? Why did he not stop all it? Because you get that fun coming out of it.
And that's what Gary talked about this whole evening, is why God does allow evil. There's many reasons, and Gary gave many reasons tonight.
But a person that doesn't even understand the concept of serving trusting in that, I don't think they can grab that.
Well, I think it's also important to define what evil is. That oftentimes it gets treated as a thing. Like God allowed this thing to come into being, this thing called evil, when I don't think that's an accurate description of it. That you're also, what have you heard it said, that evil is not a thing in that sense. It is rather a lack of something. It is a lack of good. It is a lack of relationship or influence by God. Just as darkness is an absence of light, evil is an absence of good. And so what you're talking about is not this bad thing with growing influence. It is about a lack of goodness. When you look at it from that perspective, things tend to look differently.
Another question?
Hang tight. Okay, so about 4 weeks ago, we were out at Oceanside, and there were 3 young people, about 17 years old, and a guy named Clayton. He was being kind of arrogant and sarcastic and stuff, and we were sharing the gospel with him, and he says, okay, if there's a God, and this guy was rolling by in a wheelchair, he goes, how come God didn't go fix that guy? And I said, in order for God to fix somebody, somebody's got to be broken first. And I said, to show you that he can do it. And I said, quite frankly, I said, you go chase the guy down and have him come back. I said, I'll pray for him. Oh, yeah, okay, well then tell God to show up right in front of me and I'll believe him. You've heard that one before? So how'd you respond to that?
Well, can I share just something I just didn't have the time to do? But this is from World Magazine. It was a short article. It's called The Dying Evangelist. It's a guy that goes out and talks on the street corner, but he's suffering right now from Huntington's disease, neurodegenerative genetic disorder, causes progressive loss of muscle, nerve, motor control to the point of paralysis and then death. No cure. His mother, he saw his mother go through it and she died. And now he's getting worse and worse. But here's what he says at the end. He calls Huntington's disease a gift to help me grow. His wife concurs, saying her husband's needs have forced her to give up, quote, being a control freak, and have also helped their 2 daughters, 9 and 10 years old, not be wrapped up in themselves. Anyway, so I thought that was kind of powerful. So here's a guy and Johnny Erickson taught it would be another one. There are people that go through terrible things, and they say it was a blessing, that their life is better because of it. They were too self-centered or whatever, and it's changed people around them. This guy I told you about that ran over his own child says the same thing, that something has come out of it. And so this guy goes by in the wheelchair. Maybe it's better for him to be in that situation because of what it's doing to him spiritually, to his soul. I don't know.
When tragedies hit, you can either run towards God or you can run away from God. Mothers of drunk drivers, that mother who started MAD, she had a child killed by a drunk driver. She turned it into an organization and has done tremendous good, where somebody else gets angry at God and runs away. What good does that do? Doesn't do anybody any good. So you can either run towards God and seek God, or you can run away from God, which it sounds like that gentleman was doing.
Well, yeah, he was trying to run away, and I think the 2 people that were with him were semi-believers or wanted to, and he was kind of being arrogant and stuff. So he said, okay, well, make God, Jesus show up right in front of me and I'll believe in him. And I said, well, I don't know if that's going to be true or not. I said, 2,000 years ago, he showed up right in front of people and they killed him. And they didn't believe him. They didn't believe he was who he said he was. And even though he healed people and did all these kind of things. I said, so, you tell me, are you going to bow down on your knee if he shows up in front of you? Are you going to worship him if he shows down, or he shows you something that you would say would validate your belief in him? So it's kind of a switch around and turn around stuff is how I would deal with some of those people. But those were some real world couple weeks ago questions.
I heard somebody say if God showed up, they'd go get a CAT scan. They wouldn't believe necessarily. They'd say, okay, there's something wrong with my mind. I mean, they're not, like you said, they're not going to fall on their knees in front of them. At least some people won't.
Yeah, I want to make kind of a comment. And the interesting thing is, I go down with Keith every once in a while down on Oceanside Pier. And very rarely we run across atheists. Most of the time it's young people and Marines that are very responsive to the gospel. And very rarely do they come up with questions that, theological questions and what have you. But in talking to atheists, it's very interesting because it's really not a fair argument, because we have all the evidence. And usually one of the things I like to say after I've talked to an atheist, I said, there's one thing about once we pass on from this earth, once you pass on from this earth as an atheist, you'll no longer be an atheist. But then it's going to be too late for you.
Yeah.
Well, I've often said, and I agree with you, that most people, when you start asking questions, you unmask the fact that they don't know what they believe or why they believe it, which gives us an advantage. And when we go up against people that have great knowledge of their beliefs, in a couple of weeks after the Trinity, I'm going to talk about Jehovah's Witnesses. They are well trained, but here's the problem. It is harder to give evidence or support error, much easier to defend truth. So it's hard to defend error, much easier to defend truth. We have the truth. And so that's why you have an advantage. You don't have to have as much knowledge or be as smart as the person you're talking to, because we have the truth. We have the answers, and they don't. So I'm affirming exactly what you said. Praise the Lord for your efforts to being out on the street.
I was thinking about the question when the person asked, well, show me if you can show me where God is, I'll believe. And I guess I would say, I cannot make God appear before you. If I can do that, then I'm bigger than God. So, but I can always pray for you, because then through prayer, maybe you will experience God. So if there's anything I can pray for you, please let me know. And I think it's just like, we can feel or we can see the wind because we see the leaf rustle. We can feel the breeze because it blows my hair. It makes me feel cool. But my eye cannot see wind itself. Thank you.
I think we all ought to have a story, our story too, so we can share with these people, what God's done in our life, that it's a reality to us.
I was just going to add on to his question about why God would allow things to happen. And it's kind of has to do with reflection, in my opinion. You could make a mistake and continue. We're live in sin where we can't fathom God's ways, especially living in sin. I mean, that makes total sense. And so there could be a domino effect of decades even. And it could just be, one time he reveals the reasons why, and just for you to bear witness, not only for yourself, but to someone else who's going through the same thing. And, that's powerful stuff. I mean, it's hard to kind of grasp that, but.
3 years ago, I had a stroke. I'm kind of a fitness nut. Fitness nuts are not supposed to get strokes. I entered a club that I wasn't aware of when I got that stroke. The club was that when people heard that I had a stroke, I had so many people come up and talk about things that they have gone through. And so there is a club that circles around pain and suffering, and it brings us together. It brought me closer to these individuals who opened up to me to share the issues they have. I could go on in my own issues, but the stroke is enough.
Well, what do you think on time?
Well, if we have any more questions, we'll try a couple more. Other than that, we'll retire to the. You want a question? Looks like you're. Yes, no? Yes. Here, we're bringing the mic right to you. And your name is?
Toby.
Toby. Toby. Okay, Toby.
So I have three daughters, or we have three daughters, and one of our daughters who grew up in the faith and believed and defended it actually, about 5-6 years ago, she just kind of said, it's hard for me to believe anymore. And, it's been a big source of pain, obviously, for me. But one of the things she said was she feels like it's, the way, the truth, and the life is through Christ. But that in her mind, that is a very narrow, like if God is a loving God and he sees cultures all around the world where some, of course, have never heard his name, how can they be condemned? And so that is a hard question to answer, because I believe that God is just and holy. And I feel like there's an answer. I don't feel like someone who's never heard him is going to be damned to hell, but yet she felt that was actually unloving in some ways. So it's not that she doesn't believe there's a God anymore, but she just has a hard time believing in that narrow Christ is the only way.
Is a guy named Rocky here tonight? Okay. Somebody emailed me about a week ago and said that very same question. And so I found some good stuff that I sent him. If you email me, I'll send you some of that material. But it's the idea of how can God send people to hell who've never heard, and there are a lot of parts to the answer. So I'll send you that. If you guys all want it, I'll send it to everybody. Okay. It's by a guy who's right over here in Vista. His name is Charlie Campbell. If you have a chance, it's called alwaysbeready.com. Okay, all one word, alwaysbeready.com. He puts out the greatest stuff. He's the least known apologist around, but the guy is amazing. He's got some really quality stuff. Just look up alwaysbeready.com, and if you want, you can type it in yourself. I'll go ahead and send you the article. I'll send you a link. But just type in, what about all the people who've never heard of Jesus? And he's got good, solid Bible verses and a really good response to that. So Charlie Campbell, he's got DVDs. He's got all sorts of stuff. Nice guy.
In response to that, Toby, I'd like to talk to you further simply because I have a son that at one time professed faith and walked away. And we could probably go around this room, and those who have had children grow up, many of you, including me, have had at least one or maybe all walk away. And so it is heartbreaking. It's something my wife and I pray about for him. And it's one of those tough things to go through that Gary was talking about. But on the issue, Gary actually covered the issue about, is Jesus the only one? Jesus is the only one who solved the sin problem. See, you don't, and she said it herself. She said something that Gary covered, was that you don't go to hell for wrong belief. You go to hell because you break God's law. Jesus is the solution to the problem. He's not the problem. See, and this is what we've done as Christians. We've made Jesus the problem. If you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell. We've made him the problem. But the problem's sin. He's the solution. So we need to rephrase how we communicate to people when we're sharing the gospel with them, and don't make Jesus the problem. I mean, it's more complex than that. I mean, that's just a tiny piece of it, but that was more for everybody else, Toby, than just you. I wanted to make sure that we understand how we can misrepresent what Jesus does on the cross.
You want to close, Steve, and then
Sure. Father, we thank you for sending your Son, that he is the solution. The problem is sin, and we all fall short. And we just pray for each of us as we get opportunities that we'll have the courage to share about your Son, and for our families. God, those of us who have children, especially those who have walked away, it's a painful thing to go through. And as it continues, you can feel the pain daily. And my heart's broken, and I know there's others here whose hearts are broken. And so, God, all we can do is look to you for comfort as we walk through this. And we're just thankful for a group like this in Jesus' name. Amen.
More snacks.